we are concerned about adaptation for cross-pollination, and in this video we will see what is outbreeding devices, then DICOGAMY. In DICOGAMY, what is the PROTANDRY and PROTOGYNY, then heterostyly for cross-pollination, then unisexuality of the plant to gain the cross-pollination, then prepotency, then hercogamy, and last one, that is a self-incompatibility. Beside these, there are so many like these examples are there in which plant adapt themselves for cross-pollination. So many examples are there that in some plant that only one sex appear or second sex it get suppressed. Like these examples are there, but we are concerned with these DICOGAMY, heterostyly, unisexuality, then prepotency, then hercogamy, and self-incompatibility, because these all topics are important as far as the NEET exam is concerned. Now see here, this one, outbreeding devices. In case of these outbreeding devices, here out, this one breeding, and this one devices. Here breeding means when the two different variety, when we cross with each other, we form third variety, in which the good characters of these both varieties come, and a good variety get formed, a improved variety get formed in the program. That program we call it as breeding, in which hybridization takes place. High breed, more production, that plants formation takes place in that program. We call it as breeding. Outbreeding means here cross-pollination, means by the cross-pollination, outbreeding. By cross-pollination, we are gaining such type of high-yielding crop production plants or such type of organism. So outbreeding devices we call it as adaptation. Means flower is bisexual. Androecium and gynoecium, both sexual characters are present in the flower, but still flower is bisexual. Their androecium and gynoecium, both sexes are present in the flower, but still flower gain cross-pollination, and that flower avoid self-pollination. So there is a changes, there is a adaptation in that flower. That devices that plant or that flower develop in the evolutionary history, we will see one by one here. In case of this topic, we call it as outbreeding devices. Now see here, adaptation for cross-pollination. First example, this one. We call it as a DICOGAMY. Here di means here two. Dico means maturity period of that two sexual character, that is the androecium and gynoecium, which is present in the flower. Their maturity period is different. Means androecium mature first and then gynoecium, or gynoecium mature first and then androecium. That term we call it as a DICOGAMY. Means maturity periods of androecium and gynoecium maturity period, it is different like this. So these DICOGAMY are of two type. One we call it as a PROTANDRY, and second we call it as a PROTOGYNY. One we call it as a PROTANDRY and second we call it as a PROTOGYNY. PROTANDRY takes place in case of, for example, this is a okra, bhendi. Second example, that is a cotton, and next one, that is a salvia. Here PROTANDRY, see here, pro means the first, and this is a tandry, this is a androecium means a male reproductive organ mature first. Androecium mature first, pro means first, androecium mature first, means stamens mature first, means pollen grain formation takes place in case of these flower first, and then gynoecium get mature. Such type of adaptation get carried out in case of this example. One we call it as okra, that is a bhendi. This one. In this flower here, this is a member of Malvaceae, and in this flower, androecium and gynoecium both are present. Second example, that is a cotton. Bhendi flower and cotton flower are somewhat same. These members, they show same type of. This one is a cotton plant, and is a cotton plant. This is a flower. This one, these all are the petals, and if you open the petals of these flower, we will see here. These all are the stamens. Many stamens, their filament bind with each other and forms one tube, filamentous tube like this here. So these all are the androecium, and this one is the gynoecium, and these all we call it as androecium. They forms like this one filamentous tube here, like this. So here protandry means here first androecium get mature, and when the androecium get mature here, this all androecium get mature like this. One stamen, then second stamen, then third stamen, then fourth stamen, fifth stamen, sixth stamen, many stamens. Their filament join to form like this a filamentous tube. This one. Such a condition we call it as a monoadelphous condition. In case of this cotton, we will see this a monoadelphous condition. So this monoadelphous condition is there, and gynoecium is like this. Now see here. What happened in case of this okra bhendi plant, in case of this cotton, and in case of this salvia. These androecium, this one, andry, these stamens means these androecium mature first. Here pro means first. Pro means first, and these andry we call it as androecium. Means these structure. Collectively we call it as what? Androecium. First androecium mature in case of these okra, and in case of cotton, and in case of salvia. First these androecium get mature, and then this gynoecium mature. When androecium get mature, pollen grain formation takes place here. That pollen grain, with the help of insect or with the help of wind, it release from this flower and it pollinate another flower. Means that this adaptation is for cross-pollination, to gain the cross-pollination and to avoid the self-pollination. Such a type of adaptation takes place in case of these plants. We call it as a protandry in case of these cotton, these bhendi, and in case of these salvia. Then next, that is a PROTOGYNY. Again here proto means here first, and is a gyne means gynoecium, means a female reproductive organ, that is a gynoecium, mature first, and then androecium get mature. For example, in case of this one ranunculus, this one is the example of ranunculus. These all are the flowers of this ranunculus. And second example, in case of custard apple, this one sitapal. Second example, in case of this custard apple, what happened here? Protogyny, to gain this cross-pollination and to avoid the self-pollination. Like these outbreeding devices, they accept here to gain cross-pollination and to avoid what? Self-pollination. In case of ranunculus, this one, and in case of this custard apple, first gynoecium, protogyny. Here proto means first, and this gyne means gynoecium. Means first gynoecium mature and then androecium mature. First gynoecium get mature here. This gynoecium get mature first, and after this gynosium in next week like this, next then this androecium get mature. When gynosium get mature first, it totally depends on another flower for the process of what? Pollination. And from the another flower, male reproductive organ, that is the stamens, from that pollen grain get carried out with the help of wind or with the help of insect, and pollination get carried out here. Means the cross pollination takes place in case of these flower ranunculus or custard apple. Though these flowers are bisexual, both the sexes are present, still cross pollination takes place in case of this flower. Means these flower adapt themselves for cross pollination, not for what? Not for what? Self pollination. So here cross pollination gain, here cross pollination takes place, and self pollination totally avoided by this flower. That is the adaptation for cross pollination in case of this example okra, in case of ranunculus, and in case of this custard apple, that is a protandry, and second type we call it as what? That is a protogamy. Now see here. In next example, how the adaptation for cross-pollination takes place. See, this adaptation for cross-pollination takes place by this method, we call it as a heterostyly. In case of these prime rows, and in case of this example, we call it as oxalis. These are the prime rose flower, and this one, that is oxalis. This one oxalis plant, oxalis flower, and a section of this oxalis flower. Both prime rose and oxalis flower, they are bisexual. Means androecium and gynosium. Both sexes are present in that flower. Both sexes are present, but they avoid self-pollination and they gain what? Cross-pollination by one method. We call it as a heterostyly. Here hetero, this one. This one hetero. Hetero means a different. Hetero means different. And this is styly. Styly means style. Styly means style. So in case of gynosium, we know that in case of gynosium, there is a structure, we call it as a stigma. And there is a long structure, this one. This is a long structure, we call it as a style. And then there is a bulbous structure, we call it as a ovary, inside which that ovules are present. And this one is the thalamus. And this structure we call it as a pedicel. This one we call it as a stigma. What is it? Stigma. Then this structure we call it as a style. And this structure we call it as a ovary. And inside the ovary there is a structure which is present, we call it as a ovule. This one thalamus, and this one is the pedicel, like this. Heterostyly, style, different style. In one flower, in case of these prime rose, in one flower, style is very long, and the stamens, their filaments are very short, like this. Means here they show such type of mechanism. The style becomes long like this. The style become long. See here, the style become very long like this. And the anther or the male reproductive organs, they are present here. The male reproductive organ, that is a stamens, their filaments are very short, but a style it elongate like this. In one case of this, the prime rose, due to which here distance is the barrier. See here, if the pollen grain formation takes place, that pollen grain do not reach up to this receptive stigma. So this flower totally depends on another flower for the process of what? Pollination. So these in case of prime rose, they gain cross-pollination and they avoid these self-pollination by these forming such type of long style. And in case of another prime rose, style is very short like this. This one is the stigma, then this one is the style, and this one is the ovary. And here the androeciums or the stamens are very long like this. The stamens, their filaments are long like this. Again, here distance is the barrier. Here style is very short. In case of these prime rose, such type of adaptation takes place. Or in case of these auxiliaries also, such type of adaptation, such type of that heterostyly type of different type of style. In one flower, long style is there. In one flower, short style is there. In case of these long style, here distance is the barrier. That pollen grain do not reach up to this stigma. And here also that pollen grain do not reach up to the stigma due to very short style. And these both flowers, they are depends on another flower for the process of what? Pollination. Means here they deliberately change their structure, they adapt themselves for only cross-pollination to avoid what? Self-pollination. Now question arises here, why this plant, though they are bisexual, they change themselves to gain cross-pollination and to avoid what? Self-pollination. One scientist is there, that is a Mendel. In the Mendel, they carried out several experiments. They carried out several experiments on Pisum sativum. We will see all the details in the coming videos, but we will take some account here. Mendel carried out several experiments on the Pisum sativum, Watana. So in these experiments, Mendel found that when there is a self-pollination, 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 generation after generation, generation after generation, generation after generation, then one phenomena leads in that plants. That phenomena we call it as inbreeding depression. What is it? Inbreeding depression. When we cross the two plants of same species, or we call it as when we pollinate the same plant, the generation after generation, generation after generation by self-pollination, 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 then inbreeding depression comes there. यानी इसमें ऐसा होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वी सी इन केस ऑफ एनिमल, अगर दूध देने वाली अगर गाय है और उनके जनरेशन में अगर वही सेल्फ क्रॉस होता है, तो देन इन कमिंग जनरेशन दूध देने की कैपेसिटी जो है गाय की वो कम हो जाती है. वी कॉल इट एज ए इनब्रीडिंग डिप्रेशन. In plants also, by self-pollination, 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 the production of that plant get a decrease. We call it as what? Inbreeding depression. So to avoid this inbreeding depression, there is a need to cross such type of plant or such type of animal with another races, so that the production get tremendously increased. So here, why this plant gain cross-pollination? Though the plants are bisexual. So though the plants are bisexual, but still they gain the cross-pollination to avoid inbreeding depression, to gain a good character, to gain a high breed like this the character, to gain a dominant character or good character when comes in that plant. It leads to we call it as evolution also, to form a new species. These all plants, they gain cross-pollination in the nature like this. So here adaptation for this cross-pollination carried out in case of these prime rows, and in case of what? These auxiliaries. By this method we call it as what? Heterostyly. Then see here. Next method to gain the cross-pollination. Next method to gain the cross-pollination, we will observe in case of this papaya, in case of this castor, and in case of this mulberry, by this method known as unisexuality or dicotomy. Unisexuality or dicotomy. Here uni means one, and sexuality means only one sex is present in the flower. Means in the evolutionary history, these plants may bear both sexual character, androecium as well as what? Gynoecium. But they select only one sex in one plant, in one flower. Or we call it as a unisexuality. We call it as a uni. Here uni means one, and this sexuality. This is a sexuality. Sexuality, that is a sex. Either male or either female. In case of a papaya, male plant is totally separate and female plant is totally separate. On male plant, male flowers are there, and on female plant female flowers are there. In male plants only androeciums are present, and in the female plant only gynoecium is present. Means only one sex is present in the respective flower in case of male as well as in case of what, female. And is a female plant after fertilization they forms like these fruits, papaya. So these plant they accept this unisexuality to gain 100% cross-pollination and to avoid self-pollination. In case of castor also, see here, these are the male flowers and these are the female flowers. These plants also accept this unisexuality. We call it as a dicotomy to gain what, cross-pollination and to avoid self-pollination. In case of mulberry also, these are the male flowers and these are the female flowers. Male flowers bears on male plant and female flowers they are bears on the female plant. Unisexuality means there is a rule of only cross-pollination. Self-pollination do not take place in case of these plant to gain the improved character like this. So unisexuality is there, and due to this unisexuality they gain what? They gain cross-pollination. Now see here, in case of these potato flower, that is a Solanum tuberosum, alu, and in case of this tobacco flower, that is a Nicotiana. In case of these both flower, potato and these tobacco plants, self-incompatibility is the phenomena due to which these plants gain cross-pollination and they avoid self-pollination. How it takes place? See here. See in the flower, these all are the these all are the stamens. This one, androecium. One member of androecium we call it as a stamen. And this one that is a style. And stigma or gynoecium, this one. Means male reproductive organs are present as well as female reproductive organs are present. Means flowers are bisexual in case of potato, and in case of tobacco also flowers are bisexual. See this one collectively we call it as androecium, and this structure we call it as this one. This structure we call it as a gynoecium. Androecium and gynoecium. Means in case of this tobacco flower, in case of this potato flower, in case of both flowers are bisexual. Flowers are bisexual. Now when these flower or when these androecium or the stamens get mature, these stamens release the pollen grain by dehiscence process, and when pollen grain come out like this, that pollen grain comes here and that pollen grain get adhere to the receptive stigma of what? This is a tobacco flower as well as to the receptive stigma of what? This is a potato flower respectively, like this. But in the pollen grain of these potato flower as well as these tobacco flower, in the cytoplasm some factors are present. That factors are responsible for self-incompatibility. Means this pollen grain, no doubt it transfer from this anther lobe to the receptive stigma of same flower, but this pollen grain they do not germinate here. Due to these factor we call it as a self-incompatible factor. Such type of enzymes they are present in the cytoplasm of the pollen grain of both potato as well as what? This is a tobacco flower. They do not germinate. Means the pollen grain of same flower do not germinate here. Now this flower totally depends on another flower for the process of what? Pollination. So when the pollen grain from another flower get deposit on these stigma, then these pollen grains now germinates here. Means they gain cross-pollination and they avoid what? Self-pollination. By this method we call it as what? Self-incompatibility in case of potato flower and in case of what? Tobacco flower. Next phenomena get carried out here in case of apple. In case of what? Apple or peach. We call it as a prepotency. See, these apple flower. This one is the apple, these are the apple flower. Very beautiful flower. And in case of this apple flower, this one is the pistil, this one is the stamen, these are the petals, these are the receptacle. Means like this gynoecium, it consists of stigma, then it consists of this long style, and then it consists of this bulbous ovary, and then here like this thalamus is there, like this, and here like these stamens are present. One stamen, two stamen, three stamen consist of this one anther lobe and filament. This one is the stigma of this apple flower. This one is the style of this apple flower. This one is the ovary. Now on the other hand, this one is the anther lobe. This one is the filament and connective like this. So both androecium and gynoeciums are present in this flower. Then this flower is a bisexual flower, but here prepotency is there. Prepotency means when the anther lobe get mature, this anther lobe get dehisced and they release the pollen grain. Now pollen grain from these what we call it as a stamen, this pollen grain get a transfer from this anther lobe to the receptive stigma of a same flower here, like this, receptive stigma of what? Same flower. Now what happened here? When the pollen grain of a same flower get deposited here by any agencies, by wind, by insect, or by any agencies, these pollen grain do not germinate. These pollen grain, they do not germinate. But if the pollen grain from other flower, it get a transfer by insect or by air, and if they deposited here on the stigma of these apple, means pollen grain from another flower bearing on another plant, then only these pollen grain get it forms a pollen tube or it germinate here, and in the pollen tube two male gamete formation takes place, and these take part in the process of what? Here fertilization in the ovule like this. Mean in case of apple, the pollen grain of same flower do not germinate, but pollen grain of another flower which is present on another plant, if they come by by any agency, that pollen grain get a germinate, we call it as a prepotency. We call it as what? Prepotency. Now if the pollen grain of another flower do not comes here by any means, then the pollen grain of the same flower then germinate here. If the pollen grain of another flower of same species or another apple do not comes here, then the self-pollen grain get germinates here. Means this adaptation is to gain what? Cross-pollination. Such type of adaptation in case of this apple or in case of this peach is only meant for what? This cross-pollination and to avoid the self-pollination. Now see here pollination and all these things are going on, but the apple, this one is a fruit, it forms by this structure, that is the thalamus. From the thalamus this structure formation takes place, that is the apple. The apple formation takes place from the thalamus, like this. The apple formation takes place from this portion, we call it as a thalamus, due to which this is a fruit, we call it as a false fruit. And in that fruits, that seed and that structure which is present, that structure is this one, that ripened ovary, which is present inside the apple, like this. Now this adaptation is only for the cross-pollination. We call it as a prepotency in case of what? Apple. Now next, in case of these Calotropis procera, Rui, in Marathi we call it as a Rutski. In case of these plant, Calotropis procera, these all are the flowers and this one is the fruits. Now in case of this flower, this flower shows hercogamy. Hercogamy means physical barrier between pollen and stigma of same flower. Means here pollen grain formation takes place. Pollen grain formation takes place, but they do not deposit on the stigma of same flower due to physical barrier. And what is that physical barrier? See here. In case of this Calotropis procera, see here this is a plant. This is a plant, we call it as a Calotropis procera. It consists of like this leaf, and this leaf they show the opposite decussate type of phyllotaxy in case of this Calotropis procera. This one is the inflorescence. It consists of like this flower, and each flower they show this structure, we call it as a stigma. This one, this structure we call it as a stigma. And in this flower at the tip here, if we pick this bulge portion from this, then like this